That's actually when I first found out about you, because I watched. Well, I was kind of going through this. I need more information. I want to know all the stuff I can find. And around that time, when you and Project Veritas worked together, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This was the kind of stuff I was looking for. The bias in media, the bias in these tech companies, and
Mhm.
so you actually worked for Facebook for 2 years.
Yeah, so I was a
Wow.
contractor for Facebook. So I worked directly for Cognizant, a big IT company, and they had a 3-year, $200 million contract with Facebook. So I was basically the internet police, so the Facebook police, so to speak. But as a
Wow.
result of that, I had to study their policy language for nearly 2 years. So I had to study, um,
Mm.
and if that's too loud for you, yeah, to study their policy language. So I'm very familiar with how everything's worded, what you can do to avoid getting deleted or banned. But I reviewed videos, posts, direct messages on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
Wow. So you were actually the one recording people talking about their biases. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I filmed my coworkers talking about their biases. One of them openly talked about assassinating Donald Trump,
Wow.
taking the $80 million bounty from Iran, and so another coworker would just rag on Trump, and another coworker openly admitted to deleting, even though it was against the rules, he was deleting anything that had MAGA in it.
Yep. I
So
remember that. And I was like, that was right around the time that I myself realized that I'm a Trump supporter. And I came out with it talking about how I'm a Trump supporter. And, Facebook, there was a big, I lost half of my friends, well, quote unquote friends.
yeah,
And it was kind of a relief. I'm like, you know what? Good. If you're not going to accept me just because I have a different political meaning, leaning than you're not really a friend.
yeah.
So it was kind of an eye opener for me actually as well, and I'm sure for many people. Although it wasn't really a surprise to learn that Facebook was really biased. What I do find interesting though is when Zuckerberg was, speaking in these hearings, he was actually kind of honest about it. Like he didn't really deny it. Whereas Google and
Twitter,
Jack, yeah,
yeah.
Twitter, they were more like, no, no, we don't know, blah 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 blah. And Zuckerberg's like, yeah, absolutely, we have influence. Like, there's definitely bias. And I was like, oh, Zuckerberg, did he just admit it? And he's like, yeah. It's like, okay, wow, all right, well,
Yeah. And what they got Zuckerberg on is, so in 2018, right after I started in April of 2018. So I started in March of 2018. And
okay,
in April of 2018, Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress, and he said that it essentially testified that they do not censor political speech. And so my evidence was directly contrary to that. So when
right,
Congressman Matt Gates, I gave him some of my evidence. He actually sent a criminal referral to the DOJ for Mark Zuckerberg for
wow,
alleged perjury. So I
for
mean,
lying. That's
yeah,
true.
and I think everyone hates Zuckerberg equally, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but dude, I've got this book coming out in a couple months, and I've got a list of 40 examples. Like you had the original Project Veritas release it was 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I talked about how they gave an exception to allow Don Lemon to say on air, straight white males are filth. I'm sorry, he said white males are terror threats. The straight white
Wow.
males are filth for not supporting LGBT. That was an exception that Facebook gave. They carved out an exception to allow an attack on one ethnicity. So look, I don't like to play the race card or anything like that.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
you're gonna apply the rules, like apply them equally.
I agree with that. It's ridiculous that it's so polarized, and it's like if it's a crime to be white nowadays, and it's just
Yeah,
it, it just
the phrase white trash initially when I started there was
yeah,
hate speech as it should be. And I know
yeah,
it has a different colloquial usage in certain parts of the country,
okay,
like white trash, trailer trash, it's almost synonymous. But so it started being against the rules, but then like a year after I was there, they changed the rules and they said we're no longer considering white trash as hate speech. Um, so I just thought that was interesting. But it's just that double standard. I mean, if you substitute white trash with any other race, if you insert
certainly,
race there, obviously that would be very racist if you
yeah,
substitute any other race.
yeah, exactly. I'm sick of it. I was raised where everyone's everyone's equal until someone proves that the individual proves otherwise. You don't stereotype anybody because anyone could be cool. Anyone could be, a terrible person. Like it's in anyone's core to be an amazing person and a good person with good morals, or bad morals and a terrible person. Like literally anyone of any color can be that, any one of those type of people, and
Yeah.
it's just it's so frustrating to see how we've devolved into this segregation of whatever, everyone's putting us in these different groupings, and it's like, why? We're all human beings. Like I'm so fed up with this.
And I think
It's
that's part
sad.
of the skater culture, right? Like I know
True.
skater culture is very non-judgmental
Yeah.
and embracing of different viewpoints. And I try to,
Definitely.
I try to be the same way. Just look, live and let live. If as long as you're not attacking me, like more of a
Yep.
libertarian perspective, as long as you're not infringing on my beliefs. And actually, I'm actually on this Facebook group with some friends, and it's called Seasteading, the Seasteading Nation. So
Okay.
they want to create their own basic country out in international waters and create
Okay.
a little island um,
Nice.
and have their own society. So, I mean, yeah, we definitely need to be accepting. You talked about your, how you, when you went public with your support for Trump, the tolerant left unfriended you, right? The tolerant left.
Yeah. Oh, they did more than I mean, before they unfriended me, like just on my post, like, hey, I'm voting for Trump. I would like to. I've learned a lot in the past couple months that has shifted my views politically. If you're interested, send me a message and we'll have a chat about it. And that's what it was. And man, the comments, there was over 100 comments easily within a day and a half, 2 days.
Yeah.
And it devolved into this name calling, and suddenly these people that didn't know me at all, they were just associates, were calling me, a Nazi essentially. And I'm like, who do you know me at all? Like, get
Yeah.
out of here. Like you clearly don't understand the person I am. I'm a patriot. I love this country. I love the people in this country. I love people everywhere. But again, anyone could be a good person and anyone could be a bad person. Like, and
Yeah.
the color of the skin doesn't enter into that equation ever. Even when you find out they're a good person or they're a bad person, still it doesn't enter into the equation, because it shouldn't ever enter into that equation. Period. And
Yeah.
they need to blame people. They need to put us in these different bubbles to keep us attacking each other, instead of realizing that we should be together, because we aren't the problem. It's the people that are pulling all the strings that are the issues.
Yeah.
The big tech companies, and I mean, that's why you probably did that, the whole whistleblowing, because you needed people to see their bias and how bad it has gotten.
Yeah,
Right.
my motives for that were just seeing how global this was. So when I started there, I had access to the U.S. training decks, but I was actually hired to do content moderation as a Latin American expert or bilingual moderator. So
Okay.
I was reviewing content in Latin America, in Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, in
On
Spanish
Facebook.
on Facebook.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I had, while I was reviewing that, I also had access to all the training material in English as well, and occasionally I'd do English content. In the last 6 months, I switched entirely to the North American side, but I saw how they were interfering in elections throughout the world. I mean, Facebook
Interesting.
has training decks for Canadian elections, elections in Spain, Taiwan, Hungary, Poland. So
Wow.
seeing after a year after studying the biases and the policy, I saw these biases, and I'm like, well, if they're doing it here, if it's a global, I know it's a global policy, so
Yeah.
they do, and so if they're doing the bias here, then they're definitely doing it in other countries. So that was my motivation. I just saw the scale,
Wow.
the sheer amount of volume and content we were moderating. And so, for example, in Venezuela, at one point we had a post where it said, "Hey, people are calling for an armed revolution. Delete these posts calling for an armed revolution." And then that hit me. Hit me that Facebook has tremendous power. They have the power to shut down a revolution,
Yeah.
right? So seeing that in Venezuela really struck a chord with me. And now we're in the 2020 U.S. election. But also when I was at Facebook, I saw how they prepped for the 2018 U.S. midterms. And they really trained us hard and spent a lot of money training us. And in the first place, bringing all these content moderation jobs to the U.S. so they can more closely monitor the U.S. elections. And so we would raise up, election fraud, or like people, for example, if you're telling someone the wrong date to vote, okay, that's election fraud.
Yeah.
So to begin with, all right, so who gave Facebook the authority to enforce U.S. election law? That's my first question, right?
That's a good question.
So
and the answer is nobody.
No, nobody gave them the authority.
Yeah.
And this is the same company that had Cambridge Analytica. So even people on the left would agree, look, there's issues with data privacy. So anyways, Facebook, so they gave us a training deck for the elections. They created a whole new queue to monitor the election content. So from so I was in the North American queue from July of 2019 until February of this year.
Yeah.
And that was until we all got laid off. The contract got ended, ended prematurely. And so, I mean, we had trends like this past December, like there were trends like Civil War, Boogaloo, and so we were raising up those trends. So Facebook didn't just want, hey, we want to find what's violating. They wanted to know what was trending. So we were their eyes and ears to monitor what people were talking about. So a manager literally told me I was raising up Civil War and Boogaloo. Boogaloo means like it's kind of like a reference to a civil war.
Yeah.
And this was during the impeachment, and I'm like, hey, what should we do with this, Sean? And he's like, keep on raising up those jobs. Facebook really wants to see them. If they had seen similar trends in 2016, they would have put things in place to prevent it. He told me that face to face. So I'm like, so why the heck does Facebook care so much? They wanted urgent visibility into the Democrat debates. So we clearly know that they revealed their face, their mask. They pulled off their mask in October.
Yeah.
Fully. We know they banned all these, Google banned all these YouTube channels. Yep, but leading up to it, I personally witnessed what they were doing, and I have evidence that they were interfering.